What's going on? I'm Jim Perona, and welcome to the weekly axe kicking. Alright, so I'm back in Chicago visiting friends and family. Got a holiday break from school, which is quite nice. But unfortunately, the next 3 installments of the weekly axe kicking will not be uploaded in HD because that camera is still out in Boston. Nonetheless, we're going to carry on, and this week's installment is called Embellishing a Melody. So the idea of this week's installment is to take a single line melody idea and embellish it in order to fill out the sound. So let's hear how the single line version sounds. Now let's hear the embellished version of that melody and break down the thought process that went into creating it. Alright, so let's take a look at how this became this. So this riff was used in an old band I was in called the Unit Theory, and I had that initial single line melody idea. We decided that we wanted that melody to kind of carry through a verse of the song. So we decided we wanted to fill it out a little more, just kind of bring more life to it, add more to it. So what I did was I broke that single line melody idea into parts. That would be part 1, for example. That would be part 2, and then part 1 would repeat. And then the last part. And I took each of those parts and I started adding a note underneath that top melody line. So let's start with part 1. So this top melody line starts on a C sharp on the 9th fret of the 1st string. And we do a trill and then go down to the 7th fret, which is a B. Slide down to the 5th fret, A. Trill that, down to a G. Now the first note I added underneath this trill, was an A on the 10th fret of the 2nd string, which pretty much forms the A major chord without a 5th. So A and C sharp. And then I slide down 2 frets with the note on the 1st string, which forms a G chord, G and B, without the 5th. And then, since on the top melody note we're sliding down to the 5th fret, starting on A, I decided I might as well just repeat the A and G chords. And the nearest chord tone to this A is an E, right underneath. And then I would slide down 2 more frets to the G and do the nearest chord tone to a G, which is the D. So, and the 2nd string melody played by itself. So in adding a 3rd note to this riff, I decided I would just fill out those chords completely. We already had the A and C sharp of the A chord, so I put the 5th underneath, the E, on the 9th fret of the 3rd string. And then I would slide that whole fingering down. This is, by the way, just a D chord fingering. Slide it down 2 frets to the G. And we had the 5th fret of the 2nd and 1st strings, E and A, respectively. And I would fill out that A chord with the C sharp on the 6th fret of the 3rd string. We trill the 1st string. So far we got. And then we slide this whole fingering down 2 frets to fill out that G chord, with now the 3rd of that chord, the B, is on the bottom, on the 3rd string. So the second part of this riff, starting on the 10th fret of the 1st string, that D, we do a trill from the 10th to 12th fret, slide down to the C sharp, trill, slide down to the B. So let's start adding notes underneath that. On the 2nd string, I have an A underneath this D, and then I'm going to hold that A on the 2nd string on the 10th fret as I slide down to the 9th fret, C sharp, on the 1st string, which takes me back to my A chord. And I slide that whole fingering down 2 frets. Now adding the third note to this sequence, once again I just kind of filled out these chords. So I had 2 notes of a D major chord, A, the 5th on the bottom, and then the root D on top. So I'm going to fill it out with the F sharp, which is the 3rd of a D major chord, on the 11th fret of the 3rd string. And then I'm going to go back to my original A chord fingering, then slide that down to 2 frets to the G chord. And after that, the first part of the riff repeats. Now the last part of this riff is basically the same as the second part, except we don't do a full trill here. We hold that E on top on the 12th fret of the 1st string, and then do the A chord here, and then the G chord. So we're basically eliminating the trills and just do this hammer-on right here. One more time. By the way, what I'm doing with my right hand is my index finger is planted on the 3rd string, my middle finger is planted on the 2nd string, my ring finger is planted on the 1st string. And that kind of carries me throughout this entire riff. Alright, so that about wraps it up for now. Make sure you check out the tabs at zacharmusic.com. Hope you enjoyed it. See you next week.